My name's Ian Petrie. I am a historian. I teach in history and sociology of science and South Asian studies, and I direct our grad student facing unit, the small but mighty grad unit. My colleague, Dr. Karen Legacy, and I. Karen is a chemist by training, so if you're looking to have conversation with someone from STEM, you can always reach out to her, although hopefully I'm not going to alienate you during our time together. We also support postdocs. We also support undergrads. We are the entre nous. We're the hardest working people at Setley. And we're very invested in anything we can do to support you in your job search. I will say that, you know, front of mind for me in thinking about that is helping folks pursue a career in higher education. But I wouldn't be here if I weren't also invested in helping you think through ways in which you could pursue something in the K-12 space. It's not a space that I have um, firsthand experience of. However, between me and I think between our career services colleagues, we know lots of people in our networks, Penn alums who are teaching in independent schools, and I would always be happy to connect you to anybody that I know for an informational interview or for additional support. And I'm, of course, happy to consult with you about this stuff and think through it with you. I want to start by talking about, as Diane said at the top, thinking about ways in which you can accrue useful teaching experience while you're here at Penn. Because as you know, among doctoral programs, there are some that require 4 semesters of teaching. There are some that ensure that every doctoral student teaches their own class. And there are other departments where that would never happen and where there's very few opportunities to teach. So you may need to be a little bit entrepreneurial, and you may hopefully have at least one mentor who's supportive of your interest in teaching, who can try to help you make space to do it, and then possibly seek out opportunities, maybe in other departments. So I know that there's definitely folks from graduate programs in the School of Medicine who have picked up TA-ships in the Arts and Sciences Biology department, for instance. And I'll advertise some other teaching opportunities as we move forward. I first want to talk about what Setley can do for you. There's some things that you can do while you're here that provide a little bit of evidence that you've undertaken to do some professionalization around teaching. And the first one that we have is the teaching certificate, if you're not familiar with it. It's meant to be, this is for PhDs and terminal masters. So I apologize to our master's colleagues on the call who are not eligible to get this for historical reasons that I cannot change. But for PhDs or MFAs for that matter, you go to 5 workshops. We offer over 100 workshops across each academic year. You do 2 semesters of TAing, however your program defines it. And here again, if you don't have a requirement in your program, come talk to me and we could try to strategize a way for you to pick up a semester as a recitation TA, a semester as a grader, possibly in another program. You get observed and get feedback, typically by one of our graduate fellows, although I also do some of these observations. That's meant to be a collegial and supportive and generative process. It's not done in the spirit of a critique. And once you've done those things, and you can do them in any order that makes sense to you before you graduate, the last piece, and the only thing that has to happen at a particular point in time, is we get together people who are ready to finish the certificate and you draft a teaching statement. And I think this is a useful reflective exercise. A teaching statement is asked for in lots of academic job postings, but even the exercise of thinking through your priorities and your strategies, that's going to be a useful thing to have done if you are applying for jobs at independent schools or interviewing and talking about your teaching. So I think even if you're not applying for tenure track positions, drafting a teaching statement is a useful exercise. And it also, that session always ends up being just an enjoyable cross-disciplinary conversation with a group of peers. Um, Reach out to me if you have any questions about these things, or you can pop questions in the chat while we're here. Having said that I am interested in supporting you in your job search, I am highly motivated to do anything in my power, short of intimidating your competition, to help you get a job. And so working with you on any of your written materials, teaching statements, these are commonly asked for across disciplines um, for higher ed jobs, putting together a teaching portfolio, um, answering questions about teaching on a Zoom to prep for a screening interview, or if you do end up getting a campus invite, and this could be any kind of campus, preparing for a teaching demonstration. And obviously, the more teaching focused the job you're applying for is, the more people are going to care about these things. Typically, faculty mentors at Penn don't have experience with a lot of teaching materials or with teaching demonstrations because of the trajectories that they've been on. And that's why we're here. And we do a lot of work. I've been busy all fall working with folks on these things. And I'm always happy to see people have success and all credit to them. But if I can help give you a little bit of a boost to succeed, then I want to do that. So depending on your job search, don't hesitate to come and see us while also working with our esteemed colleagues at Career Services. I would say use anybody who's offering their assistance and their eyeballs and their time to you. So thinking about, what you can leverage. So I would say typically for the purposes of, a tenure track job at a university teaching is all they're really going to be interested in. And so I wouldn't normally lean into experiences you may have had as an undergrad. I think if you're thinking about being in the K to 12 space, then expanding your sense of what's relevant and talking about it in a cover letter or in a teaching statement. So, do you have experience from undergrad or grad school in working as a tutor? Of being an LA, that's what we call undergraduate TAs here at Penn, or a TA or a TF, teaching fellow is used by some programs. And again, whatever those duties were, even if it was just grading and office hours, that's still teaching, and it's something that you can talk about. In a perfect world, you have some experience running a recitation or a lab, but again, these experiences are unevenly distributed. I talk to STEM people in particular all the time about your mentoring experiences. Sometimes I meet STEM grad students who write a teaching statement where they don't talk about mentoring at all. And when I poke them, they reveal that they've mentored younger graduate students, they've mentored undergrads, they've mentored high school students in the lab. And so all of these things could be turned to account in making the case for why you're going to be a good fit in teaching at an independent school. And also, most STEM folks have done some kind of outreach. And so, if you've got a track record of doing scientific communication with students, with members of the community, all of that is readily transferable and can establish your bona fides as being ready to teach in a different context. So, and again, I'm happy to have a one-on-one with you. I'm happy to talk to you about this one-on-one later in this call, but I'm happy to talk to you at any point about this. Um, so while you're here, what else can you do? And again, some of this depends on having some mentors who are supportive. My hope in the year 2024 is that a grad student can feel empowered to talk honestly with their mentors about their career aspirations, but I'm not naive and I know that this depends on the personalities involved. And I still meet grad students who feel like they can't really talk about this with their mentors. So I recognize that this may be not easy for everybody. But can you reach out to one or more mentors or just somebody that you know in the department and say, hey, can I give a guest lecture? Can I give part of a lecture just to hone my teaching chops, stay in the game, or get some additional experience, particularly if it allows you to teach to different audiences? Um, because I would say, um, the nature of teaching at some independent schools is almost identical in terms of where it's being pitched intellectually with introductory teaching that you would experience here. And so, if you have a chance to present to an intro bio or chem class or whatever it is here at Penn, that would be great. I would add guest lectures by grad students frequently happen when the faculty are away, and I understand why that happens, but it's undesirable. I think you want to, whenever possible, do a guest lecture and either have the professor of the class there or have one of your mentors there, because I want them to be able to write about the quality of your guest lecture if they're doing a letter of recommendation for you, or talk about your teaching if they're getting a call for a reference check, which is probably more likely to happen outside of a tenure track academic job search. Either way, you want somebody witnessing what you're doing. One of the great frustrations of my job is meeting grad students who've done a ton of teaching, and for institutional reasons, they don't have evals, and no one's ever observed them. And it puts you at a competitive disadvantage. You can also ask a colleague, I covered two recitations for one of my TAs the other week. I'm not saying that to establish my saintly credentials, although they are real. But, there was an opportunity where if somebody else in the department had been desirous of getting some more teaching experience, they could have subbed in. So you may have some colleagues who are teaching recitations or labs where you might, with the blessing of the faculty, be able to cover for them because you know that they're going to a conference. Again, anything you can do to just get yourself in rooms with students and accrue some additional teaching experience. Lastly, in multiple schools across campus, there are summer programs for high school students. And I need to do more. I have some connections with those programs, but not a lot. But I'm happy to try to assist you, to connect you to the right people, to figure out how to get a gig as a TA for one of these programs, because I know that um, these programs tend to recruit both from graduate students of various types and sometimes from Penn undergraduates. Um, and I know that they also sometimes are happy to recruit international students. So this could be relevant to anybody on the call. Couple of examples. This is in arts and sciences, um, advertising high school programs. This is run through the College of Liberal and Professional Studies. Um, I queried them this week. I didn't get a totally clear answer, but at least I have some names that I could follow up with on your behalf or in tandem with you. Another example is in the School of Engineering. There's a summer academy where they again offer a suite of courses. These are taught by full-time Penn faculty or staff. They're kind of intense mini courses. And again, they recruit TAs to act as mentors and graders. So that would be an opportunity where if you really are, I mean, I think these programs could be useful in any in many kinds of job searches, but if you're specifically thinking you'd like to be working in a high school, then trying to get involved with one or more of these programs would be useful. Oh, there's a man in a shirt and tie who's eyeballing me, Eva. Um, um, right now, so this um, I happen to know a couple of people who work at the Baldwin School. The Baldwin School is a wonderful school in Bryn Mawr that's an all women's high school. Um, and I just was using some examples from Baldwin to get you thinking about what are these schools looking for and how can you try to pitch yourself in light of those expectations. Um, and maybe some of the other presenters in this series have much, well, undoubtedly they have much more knowledge than I do, but I'm a big advocate of doing your research before you throw in a cover letter for a job. I would never, don't wait until you get a call back to lean into your research. Um, I think you always want to go and figure out anything that you can from the website. And as I said, I know I can highlight someone who teaches in English, someone who teaches in history, someone who teaches in neuroscience, someone who teaches in chemistry. I mean, again, I will try to use my network or figure out other options to connect you for an informational interview with somebody working at a school like the one you're applying to, or even if, maybe there's somebody you can talk to at the school that you're applying to. Um, so why did I put this screenshot up? As I alluded to before, 80% of faculty have advanced degrees. So having a master's, having a doctorate is highly, highly desirable at independent schools. This is part of how they want to represent themselves to prospective parents, right? They want to impress prospective parents and students with the caliber of their faculty. Why did I include the extracurriculars? Because it is also highly desirable if you can articulate ways in which you would be involved in supporting the extracurricular or co-curricular activities at the school. This is also true if you're applying to like a liberal arts college. It's less true if you're applying to a research university, but this is relevant to college teaching as well. Um, but it's super relevant for the high schools. And the stereotype is that they want you to coach. Um, if you do a sport, that can certainly help you. The chemist that I know was a multi-sport athlete, and I think that he is, in addition to teaching chemistry at the school he's at in New Jersey, he's also one of the football coaches. My message to you is not that you need to become a jock if you aren't already one, because, and Diane and I were talking about this yesterday, you can also get involved by supporting musical theater, being a mentor to the student newspaper, um, mentoring students who are mounting a week of programming around climate change, right? There's all sorts of things that you could get involved with that fit your interests and experiences. Well, we have multiple people who sing on this call. That would be another opportunity, okay? But just that they are looking for people who aren't just brains on sticks with regard to your subject matter expertise and that you're going to be able to contribute to the larger life of the school. And you also want to look at come on, slide. Advance for me, please. Um, how do they talk about teaching on their websites? Okay, so I fully concede that this is a whole bunch of text on a slide and it's terrible slide design, but please indulge me in this, forgive me. So here's a profile, again, from the Baldwin School of the upper school, the high school science department chair who has a PhD from Hawaii. And, you know, I've highlighted here some of the ways that they're talking about his teaching, right? Emphasizing active engagement, hands-on learning, and that this is about empowering, in this case, young women to lean into studying science and to take on leadership roles, right? So you want to think about the ways in which you can think about teaching and talk about teaching that are going to align with the vision of the school. And I think that this is probably quite typical of these independent schools, which tend to be well resourced and they tend to be aspirational for their students. Not that high school teachers in the school district of Philadelphia, where my kids go, aren't also aspirational and don't do interesting and great things with their students. But I think that this is particularly the cachet of your independent schools is, thinking about how am I going to enable a group of young people to think like biologists, think like physicists. How am I going to get them actively learning science, learning social science, and doing meaningful research, right? I think like that is part of what you also want to be thinking about is how can you take your experiences that have been in the very particular context of a research university and take your passion and your knowledge and translate it to a different setting, which in some cases, like in my discipline of history, there are people doing things with students at independent schools that are, as I said before, are just like you would do with college students. And that, they have the resources, they have the database subscriptions to get students doing really substantive research in high school. I was telling Diane about a student from a school in Washington, D.C. who read an article in a major history journal and had doubts about it and did research that proved that the article was mistaken and it got published in the same journal. This kid was like 16. At that point, I just dissolved into a pile of ash and gave up on my own aspirations of being a historian. But you really think about ways in which you could create impactful learning opportunities for students. Like you really want to lean into that. And I'm happy to try and, talk with you and think about what that would look like. because I do think that you have at independent schools, one, as you know, you don't need to be certified as a public school teacher would be. And also they don't have the same curricular requirements so that they can be more expansive, or something else that you might think about is ways in which you could find yourself teaching in a, interdisciplinary kind of context. That might be a framing that would be of interest that could come up. Or I suppose I haven't investigated this, but I could imagine that again, the faculty to student ratios are quite favorable at these schools where you find yourself team teaching something with someone from another disciplinary background because your two perspectives illuminate the issues of climate change or something else that is going to be really meaningful for the students. Because you might find yourself, I had an advisee who came out of an independent school and she was never in a class with more than 10 students. And so to think about, what could you accomplish with such a small group of students? And students who are highly motivated. And again, working in a context where all things being equal, you're pretty highly resourced. And I would also say, in my experience, um, in talking to folks who've gone on to these kinds of jobs, there's actually serious faculty development opportunities if you find yourself teaching at an independent school, where some of them have a teaching center, like the one I work in, like they actually have educational developers who work with their faculty, or that in some cases they have like summer funding so that you could go and participate in an institute of one kind or another. So I think it's actually, a super exciting space to find yourself in. This is one more person from the Baldwin School, who's happens to be married to a friend of mine. He's a history teacher, did his PhD at the University of Texas at Austin. This is from a few years ago. But again, thinking about research orientation, creative thinking, and just, coming up with a vision of how you would teach that's actually like super ambitious, right? Like that's, I think, where you need to sort of put yourself. The one thing I'm going to stop sharing now because that's the extent of my deck, but this is something that's sort of TBD. But one thing that I would also be happy to help you with is figure out where are the interesting conversations about teaching in your field, broadly speaking, at the secondary or in the K-12 realm, right? This is something that I work with people on for thinking about college teaching as well, because the standard here is not have you already done all the things, right? Your starting position for establishing your suitability is to say, yeah, I do have these relevant experiences, but then you also just want to show that you are alive to what you should be thinking about moving forward and what the role will be like, what the working conditions will be like. And so learning just by reading publications, reading blogs, getting on a relevant listserv, there could be some podcasts, sort of figuring out where are the cool conversations about teaching biology in independent schools happening? Because they have to be happening. I mean, no, they're happening in faculty lounges, but there has to be, I think part of the way you establish your credibility is showing that you're alive to what the national conversations or international conversations around this might be. And so, I haven't done all the things, but I'm aware of the considerations, and I've started to think through how I would teach in this context in terms of how I use my classroom time, in terms of what kinds of projects I set up for my students, in terms of how I give students feedback. I call these bread and butter things. This is exactly the same advice I would give you if you were applying to, teach at Bryn Mawr. It's just looking in maybe slightly different places to find the answers to the questions.